There is so much to unpack when it comes to the January 6th committee's upcoming hearing. And so to do that, I want to bring in our political panel. Steele is a justice reporter for The Nation and one of my favorite wild guys. Mike Madrid is the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. And Doug Jones is a former Democratic senator from Alabama. Welcome to each of you. So, Mike, you're here closest to the center of trouble. Let me just start with you. The subpoena for the Secret Service. Yeah. Okay, that marks the first time the committee has subpoenaed any executive branch agency. What are some of the potential outcomes of that, you think?
Well, I think broader than the potential outcomes is the fact that you just characterized it well. It's this encircling, right? The circle is getting smaller. It's tough for a lot of people who are watching this day in and day out to recognize that a lot of work is happening at a very fast pace now. You're starting to see movement, significant movement in the political winds. You're starting to see a shift in the electorate. And I think Americans are starting to recognize that there's a lot of here, and we're starting to get that evidence rolling out. I think this could be a really, really critical piece of that.
Ellie, the here is an interesting part of this. The committee will finally take a deep dive into Trump's actions during the riot. It's the latest hearing that we know of. What do you think they need to establish really to get this sucker home, to bring it home, to make that closing argument that I think the American people want to hear?
I think it's going to be fire. First of all, I just want to go back to the Secret Service for a second. They in trouble. All right, like they got an order to preserve evidence. It is spoilage when you don't preserve that evidence. You can ask Attorney Jones about what happens to people who spoil evidence after they've been asked to hold on to it. But anyway, speaking about Thursday, did you ever see, Michael, A Few Good Men? And you know how when Tom Cruise really starts to put the screws to Colonel Jessup over the code red, it's about the fact that Santiago didn't call anybody, didn't pack anything. Right. That's going to be Trump on Friday. We're going to see for 187 minutes, he didn't call a soul, and he didn't do a thing to stop the insurrection, and that's going to be used to infer his support for the insurrectionists and his unwillingness to defend America against his own people.
Yeah, like they say, he in trouble. So, Congressman, in a recent interview with the Wall Street Journal committee member and friend Adam Kinzinger wouldn't rule out issuing subpoenas to Trump and Pence. What would compel them to testify? I mean, you know, just what would get them in that seat? Is there any reason for us to expect that they will show up, especially as it relates to a potential prosecution of Donald Trump?
Hell no. I mean, there is no way. I mean, if you think that there was a scuffle in the Secret Service car about going to the Capitol, you can't imagine the scuffle with his lawyers to keep Donald Trump from testifying. That is not going to happen. And quite frankly, I would be surprised if the committee ends up issuing subpoenas. You know, what often happens with grand juries or, Department of Justice investigation, they issue an invitation. You know, people have been asking to get their story out and do things. Send them a letter, ask them and tell them the committee is inviting them to come testify under oath. Don't let anybody set the parameters, but invite them, because if you subpoena, they're not going to do it. Then you're either going to have to give up the subpoena, go to court. It just doesn't make any sense. But regardless, you will not see Mike Pence or Donald Trump in front of that committee, in my opinion.
What do you say? No way, no how. Well, it's an interesting turn of the worm, because this past Friday, the CEO of Overstock, Patrick Byrne, testified before the committee, and he was one of the outside advisors who participated in that December 18th meeting at the White House, urging Trump to seize voting machines. Let's take a listen to what he told NBC about his testimony.
I have to say they treated me much more fairly. It was generally a little bit of bruised elbows, but it was they were fair. Their questions were fair. They seemed to really want to know. It surprised me. I did not think they really wanted to know what happened. I felt that they come in here, that they'd been trying to construct another narrative, but I actually felt they were very fair to me. They let me answer the questions fully, and they seemed quite interested.
Mike, what does that tell you, A, about the kind of witness that Byrne likely was before that committee, and B, the fact that, you know, he was surprised that they actually wanted to be honest about asking him questions.
Well, he's playing a lot friendlier than with the committee than I think most people would expect.
Yeah.
Look, Byrne was in there for 8 hours, so he was giving up the goods.
Yeah.
Right? He was corroborating this, by all records, by all estimations, a very crazed meeting that was happening with Sidney Powell, with Mike Flynn. The wheels were coming off. President Trump decides to go forward down this crazy road that he was a part of. I think Byrne brings a certain credibility, as much and as wild as a witness as he's been, to corroborate a lot of what we have heard anecdotally. He's the one putting the meat with the potatoes, and we're going to start seeing again a lot more of this tightening of the noose. I can't stress that enough. Incidentally, Byrne was somebody who was romantically related to Butina, the Russian agent, who's been involved with the National Rifle Association and was brought charges against by our own federal government. Now a member of the Russian parliament, by the way. This person is a nefarious actor himself. For him to be turning state's evidence this way tells you a lot's going on.
It is an interesting twist. Senator, you've expressed some surprise that Congress hasn't introduced a resolution to bar Trump from holding office again. Here's what Congressman David Cicilline had to say about that.
Yes, actually, I began drafting one last December. I have already circulated with my colleagues that essentially finds, based on the work of the January 6th Commission, that Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection and therefore barred by the 14th Amendment from ever holding office again. The truth is we're awaiting the completion of the January 6th committee before we introduce it. And the reality is we keep adding whereas clauses because every week, because of the excellent work of this committee, we have more evidence of the former president's direct involvement.
Cicilline went on to note that the resolution would only require a simple majority in the House and Senate. How do you feel about this resolution's prospects in either chamber?
You know, quite frankly, Michael, I've always believed that was the more appropriate way for Congress to deal with Donald Trump. There was never going to be a conviction for the impeachment, the second impeachment. Everyone knew that. I'm not even sure that, given the silence we have seen from Republican leadership in the Congress of the United States over the evidence that we've seen, the compelling evidence from the January 6th committee, I'm not sure that they would impeach now and get the necessary votes. A resolution would require Democrats to vote. And look, it's politically fraught. It looks like it could be in vendetta. It's not one of those things that I think anybody should take lightly. But the evidence is pretty compelling, and that's why I raised it this morning. And I'm glad it was raised with the congressman, because I think it's a way to deal with it with the Democratic votes that we have in the House and the Senate right now. Let the chips fall where they're going to fall.
All right. So, Ellie, despite his newfound willingness to testify before the committee, Trump associate, you got to love him to know him, I guess. Steve Bannon, is looking to make a move here. His contempt of Congress trial is set for tomorrow. How do you see this whole thing playing out, buddy?
Yeah, well, first of all, can we just give applause to the January 6th Commission, right? Because these are people who were trying to stonewall the committee for 18 months, right? Bannon didn't want to talk to nobody. Byrne didn't want to talk to nobody. Now, all of a sudden, now when they see how bad it looks for them, now everybody give me a microphone. I want to do my show, right? So, kudos to the January 6th committee. What we're going to see with Bannon is that he was in contempt of Congress. He ignored a lawful subpoena under a bonkers legal theory that a person who was not working at the White House still somehow a person who was not the president and not working at the White House still had a claim to executive privilege. That claim was bonkers. I think that the Department of Justice is going to put the screws to him now. But I think that this shows also, Senator Jones was talking about the need for a House resolution. I'm still holding out hope that at some point, the Department of Justice gets involved in the game, because they are the law enforcement agency here. And you see, and when the Department of Justice starts leaning on people like Bannon start squealing. People like Stuart Rhodes start talking. There's a lot that a FBI subpoena and a DOJ prosecution can do to loosen some lips around here.
Ellie Stahl, Mike Madrid, Doug Jones, thank you each for being here. Really appreciate it. After the break, we're following the breaking news out of Uvalde after scathing report released by Texas officials uncovered many systemic failures in May's mass shooting there. And gun violence on the rise in some cities, but getting little attention. I'll speak to NBC's Kate Snow, who was embedded overnight in one of the hardest hit areas. That's next.